What's up, guys? This is the Unie-FY podcast. I'm your host, T. Dustin Williams. This is where we have deep conversations on how we can unify businesses, the community, and most importantly, our families. And how could we have a better guest than someone who has actually devoted his life to doing that? This is Pastor Daniel Goulding. Daniel, thank you so much for being here, man.
2, 1.
Man, it's an honor. It's a privilege, man. Excited to be here.
You're such a handsome dude. What the heck, bro?
You got to have one gift.
No matter if we really suck at this and this thing is a huge flop, we're going to get the views because of that face.
Hey,
I can tell you that.
There you go, man. Do what I can.
So Shohei Ohtani, 50-50, never been done before, right? That was crazy.
Yeah.
Daniel Goulding, Plant Church, 3 months later, 5,000 people at Easter, never been done before, in my opinion. I mean,
Not that I've heard of.
that's
yes.
insane.
Yeah, it's kind of crazy.
No, that's absolutely crazy. Like, people don't get it. Like, it's got to be the fastest growing church that you now represent, probably in America. Like, how are you doing it?
Man, that's a great question. But yes, it's we are a bit of an anomaly with the church planting networks that we're a part of. We understand that we're an outlier. We've had to throw out a lot of the playbooks, a lot of the things that we've been told just haven't applied. One of them is like, hey, when you grand open, whatever your attendance is, you're going to typically drop back to about 50% of that. And if you can get to 75% of your grand opening attendance within the next 2 months, like you're crushing it. And we didn't have any drop off between grand opening and our next weekend. And so we had planned to have a drop off. And so we've had to kind of readjust on the fly.
That's crazy. So are you like full transparency? I mean, are you like kind of holding your breath? Like, is this thing going to keep growing? Are we going to keep breaking records? Like, is there a little bit of stress to not knowing like what if there's 100 people in the audience next week? Like, where's your head at with that?
Yeah. I mean, again, luckily we're 90 days in now, so I feel like we have a little bit more of consistency and stability the first few weeks for sure. The hard part is we're now having to make staffing decisions to bring people on to help facilitate all the logistics to, orchestrate a ministry of this size, but you're trying to not increase your HR budget to a point that's unsustainable, right? I think the scarier part has been making financial decisions that are going to have, long-term impacts where families are leaving stable jobs to come work for this brand new thing. But I think there's a level we really do have a sense of peace, and we've been really modest with how we've brought staff on. We've been very conservative with, the increases that we've made, but yeah, there was definitely early weeks where I was like, this is all going to collapse and fall apart. I feel a little bit more stable today than I did then, though.
Well, honestly, like, congratulations, because you're doing something that's never been done before. Obviously, you're going to give me the Sunday school answer, no pun intended, or you're going to tell me that it's obviously, all God, but we know that God works through people, right? And he's clearly working through you to execute this crazy movement. Speaking towards kind of that movement, like, for lack of better terms, why is Jesus is becoming way more cool now for, I think, adolescents, for young adults. Yeah. Like, what are you seeing the same shift that I'm seeing in Christianity? Like, what and what do you think's causing it?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of stuff that's causing it, but yes, there is a tide that is turning. I just was reading a thing the last couple of days. Bible sales are up 22% for the first time in decades. They're talking about, I forget what the title is for the generation coming up behind Gen Z, but they're the most spiritually open generation that we've seen in a long time. They're curious. They're not, agnostic. They're not against it. As to what's causing it, I think it's a confluence of a few different things. I think a big part of it is the woke agenda that really took over our country. I think people are seeing the natural ceiling of a lot of that, and they've run it to as far as it can go, and they're left still wrestling with the biggest questions of life, like, hey, what's the point of this? Why am I here? What are we doing? What's the purpose of all of this? Why do I feel this way? Who am I? Why am I created? And I think the question is the most easily answered in the person of, Jesus and who's God. But I think this generation is asking a different question, whereas before it was like, hey, is this thing true? I think the generations coming up is asking the question is, does this thing work? Like, is this real? Like, do the Christians believe this enough to where it actually is impacting their life and is not just cultural Christianity? You know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, that's great. I mean, I love to see that, Christianity's on the uprise. I mean, it's crazy to think. I love what you said, that the woke agenda didn't work, right? I think people have been bamboozled on a lot of things. I think they're seeing families, basically, disassembled, broken more than ever,
Yeah.
which is sad. So Christianity's on the rise. Issues are also on the rise. I don't want to be a Debbie Downer, but I mean, the whole reason why we do this podcast and why we're here is we want to dive into actually helping people get, value out of it. And I think one of the biggest key points for us is helping families grow, helping families stay together, and, helping it thrive. So, I mean, what are some of the things that you're seeing that have kind of helped, that are destroying the family more than ever? Like, I'm sure you get bombarded with phone calls and emails, and
Yeah.
it almost could be, I assume that some days are pretty depressing for you.
Yeah, for sure, man. The blessing of a fast-growing church is that there's excitement in it. The downside is that, I was telling our staff last week, like, guys, a church of our size, if 5% of the people are going through really hard things, that's a large number in our context, right? You're talking hundreds of families, and yes, it's a daily thing. It's probably the hardest part of being in a new church that's fast-growing, because you just don't have the pastoral infrastructure, and so we've really taken a vantage point of, at right now, we do a lot of triage, and then we resource out. So we just go, hey, this is a great resource to go to these people, because we just don't have the staff to deal with a lot of it. But yeah, again, I think that's what we're seeing is the family unit, falling apart. I still truly believe that the family is the foundation that Jesus wants to build his entire world upon. Like, it is the foundation of civilization. It's why from the very beginning in the book of Genesis, the number one thing that Satan attacked was a marriage, right? If you even go back to the fall that happens in the Garden of Eden, it's interesting to think that Satan doesn't attack Adam while he's alone, right? He waits until Eve is there. And once there's a family established, then Satan comes and starts to erode what God has built, right? And brings in shame to something that was, when it says in the book of Genesis that the two were together, they were united in one flesh. And it's talking about physical intimacy. And said they had no shame, right? It wasn't a part of the original design. Sin comes in. And now all of a sudden the family units started to be under attack. And I think from the very beginning, that has always been Satan's plan, is he can erode God's design for the earth by destroying the family unit, right? You look at the ramifications of what happens to Adam and Eve, that literally their first children, one kills the other one, right? And all of a sudden we start to see, if you attack the home, you can destroy everything else. And I think Satan's plan is as simple as that.
It's definitely some domino effects, right? That's crazy. I think when you said that, they're in the garden, they feel no shame naked. I mean, that's a dream for me. I need to get on that Ozempic, boy.
That's right.
Sorry.
Man. It's a great visual for everybody.
Jeez Louise. Yeah. No, I mean, the family's everything. So
yeah,
what's crazy to me is you're clearly you're a very talented, gifted human being. Like, God clearly gave you some incredible talents. And now the weight of the family getting destroyed, the weight of people's sins and issues is, like, obviously, like, they're going to run to you and look at you as kind of that, you're their pastor, you're their voice of reason.
Yeah.
When was there ever how does that work to where it's like one day you're just, you're working a sales job, a 9 to 5, you're driving down the road and you're just like, dude, I think I could be a pastor. Like,
Yeah.
I feel like I know the Bible
Yeah.
pretty well. Like, that's like almost like you're dealing with this transition from almost like a normal dude to like a superhero or something a little bit more like,
Yeah.
and I know, you would tell me, dude, like I'm just a normal guy, but I think that you're an extremely talented dude. So was there ever like an aha moment or like a time when you're like, this is like, I was called to do this. I
Yeah.
like something crazy happened, an angel appeared to you.
Yeah.
Like tell me about how this happened.
Yeah, man. The funny part is, again, I think calling is a really big thing. I think that all of us are called to something, right? I think we all have a calling on our life. I think to some people, God calls them into vocational ministry, right? And for me, when I was 19, gave my life to Jesus, got saved in a church, in the very beginning of just going to church during worship, I used to have these like out of body experiences that were, I think, God literally giving me a vision. And it was me preaching on the stage of the room that I was in. And I just was like, what is happening right now? I thought that it was all the drugs that I had done, like coming full circle, like they had said these things could come back up over time or something. So I just assumed it was that. And then I started serving in high school ministry. And I was running a sales department, a sales team at the time, got an opportunity to kind of take over a whole division. And at the same time, really started to feel and wrestle through those questions of like, man, why am I here? What's the point of all of this? And I remember a pastor had asked me, if you could do anything with your life and money wasn't an issue, what would you do? And it was just the easiest answer. It was like, oh, I would spend my life with these high school kids, trying to help them navigate this season where I feel like my life went off the rails a bit differently, and to help them, I loved it. It was life-giving. It was everything. And so I think that was where I first started to go, okay, well, maybe God's calling me to this thing, and I help a lot of young guys navigate some of that now of like, how do you know when you're called to ministry? Because I think the weird part of where we sit today culturally is people do see a pastor and there is this connection to like authority and influence and, some level of celebrity. And I think some of the reasons that people want the position is because of that. And so I think you've got to ask yourself like, okay, if you're called to it, I think there's three things that are always there, right? Like God will give you the ability to do it. He will confirm it with people around you. And then he'll also give you the desire to do it, right? And if you have those three things, I think you've got the ability to be called into being into ministry. But for a lot of guys, they don't actually have the ability to do it, but they really want to do it, and nobody's giving them opportunity to do it. I think where you watch, and again, anybody that's watching this podcast can probably think of 10 different pastors that just imploded. And typically what happens is your platform, your influence grows faster than your character can sustain, right? And so you get to this position where your character's this big, but your influence and your reach is worldwide. And that's a really, really dangerous place to be. And so again, the scriptures say, don't despise the days of small beginnings, right? Like there's a lot that God can do with a little, and a lot of it is inside of your soul and inside of your heart and your character. Because I think some of the worst things that we can do for the greater good of humanity and for the advancement of the gospel is to build something big and then watch a senior pastor fall from grace, because it just has such far-reaching implications.
Oh, that's crazy. You said like, I gave my life to Jesus. You felt, there was a moment where you were called. Like, did you ever have like seller's remorse where it's like, dude, like I can never show up on Sunday in a Lamborghini because like people start asking questions or like, can you show up wearing a Rolex? Like there's kind of there's a stigma or kind of, I hate to use the word, like a handicap. Mm-hmm. Not that those things matter.
Yeah.
But like, do you ever feel like, hey, I have to be super conservative, or like, is it still a struggle?
Yeah, I mean, no question. I think anybody that says that it's not is a liar. You know what I mean? I think for me, where I started to see the struggle, because I went into full-time vocational ministry at like 23, 24. So when I got into my 30s, I started to watch a bunch of my buddies that I used to run circles around start making crazy money, and they're like, oh, they got a lake house and then they got a boat. And I'm looking at my wife and I'm like, dude, I'm just trying to have one house, and they've got, and I'm like, I'm smarter than them. I could sell better than them. And there is that part that you just go like, oh man. But again, do you really believe, right? This is something that the disciples to some degree wrestled with, right? Like these guys, when you really look at them, even Peter, right? Peter had a really successful fishing business. Most people think that he was, in modern terms, a multimillionaire, and he lost all of it, right? Because of reputation, customers. He lost everything in being a follower of Jesus. And at some point, literally, the disciples asked Jesus, like, man, we've given up a lot to follow you, right? And Jesus says, there's nothing that you've given up on this side of eternity that I won't repay 100 times over. And so I think that the legitimate question is do you believe in eternity, right? Do you believe that all of this is perishing, that none of us are promised tomorrow? And because if you do, this life in the scope of eternity is but a glimpse, right? And I think the part that's more interesting to me, the thing I think about more today than I do about earthly stuff, right? And obviously, I still got a wife and I still got kids, and earthly stuff is still a thing. But what is definitely clear to me in the scriptures is that not everybody's experience in heaven will be the same. You know what I mean? And what I mean is that Jesus hanging on the cross, the thief on the cross next to him, right? Kind of famously, right before he dies, calls out to Jesus. Jesus tells him, today you'll be with me in paradise. I don't think that guy will have the exact same experience in heaven as one of the apostles did or Paul did, right? I think that there is this connection. I can't correlate it completely. It's not this multiple levels of heaven thing that other faiths talk a lot about, but there is a connection to what you do with your life on this side of heaven will dictate what your experience in eternity is, right? And so I think that's where I'm more interested in doing what, again, Jesus said, don't store up treasures for yourself on earth where moths and rust can steal, but instead store up your treasures in heaven where moths and rust can't destroy.
I think that solves almost all our problems. If you said, just, you put it's an internal perspective, right?
Yeah.
That's what, if we just looked at anything in life, it's like, hey, am I going to choice A or choice B? Which one, if I'm looking at it from an eternal perspective and not, a weekly perspective or a monthly perspective,
Yeah.
pretty much that answers every problem that you'll ever come across.
Yeah.
And it's so hard to remember that.
Well, again, I think that's the perpetual plight of humanity, is having to wage war with your sin nature, your flesh, right? I really do believe that every human is two creations, right? You have your humanity, your flesh, and then you have your soul, right? I think the problem is for so many of us, what we feed every day, what our culture feeds every day is not our soul, but it's our flesh. And so all we know is to get more of this stuff and more of these things and bigger houses. And again, man, we know people, right? We know people that have tons of stuff. And there is once you cross the threshold where your bills are covered and you're not worried about food and, roofs over your head and your kids being taken care of, getting that stable is incredibly important and helpful. But going from okay, I've got $1 million in the bank to I've got $100 million in the bank, you're going to have some more things for sure. But I don't necessarily believe, and I've watched it play out a ton, I don't think your enjoyment and level of satisfaction in life goes through the roof, right? I think you'll have some moments where yeah, it's cool when you get the Ferrari and you get the Lamborghini, but all new things become old pretty quickly, right? And
it's an unquenchable appetite, right?
That's right, man.
I mean, God's blessed me with a few things here and there, and it's like you always think, oh, if I get this, I'll be good.
Yeah.
And then you get that, and you're just like, oh, dude, if I could get that, then I'd be good.
Yeah.
And it's just like...
And I think that's an economy of scale.
Oh,
right?
for sure.
I think that in every arena, is very practical. I think for me, what was really helpful is I grew up with a dad that grew up in the projects, literally in the projects of Chicago, had one goal in life, which was to make sure that his kids didn't suffer the way that he did growing up and have to wonder where his next meal was going to come from. And so he, went to law school, built a massive law firm all around the country, has more money than he knows what to do with. And there's also, you watch the wrestling of that didn't solve, it solved some problems for us in that the cycle of poverty was broken. But I don't look at my dad and all of his friends that are, flying around in private jets and doing all kinds of crazy stuff that people would look at and go, that's what happiness looks like. I look at them and I go, man, they're some of the most miserable people I've been around, right? And I think it just proves what Jesus has said from the very beginning, right? Money is not good or bad. It's amoral. It's what you do with it. It's a great tool. It's a terrible God.
Yeah. So like talking about money, it's like I feel a lot of people almost are turned off by church and religion because they show up and they're immediately asked for money, or it's just like always a topic of conversation. And there's obviously been a lot of corruption happen. There's a lot of religions that we hear of where there's corruption. I think something that I'm like passionate about for our viewers and for podcasts is like, can we do a little bit of a deep dive to kind of like give the basic skeletal structure of how non-denominational Christian churches work? Because I think like people are in the dark. Like, oh, if we raise an extra 100 grand, does that mean Daniel gets to go, upgrade his wife to the Lexus? Or like, how are they structured?
Yeah.
Who's keeping an eye on that? Like, how does it all work? Can you like kind of give us a basic rundown?
Yeah, man. So the sad truth is that it is, and again, this is the first time I've ever created a nonprofit from scratch and planted my own church, and so I think I've seen it closer up than I ever have before. The sad reality is there isn't a ton of oversight, right? So you can do almost anything you want to do, and I think that's the danger. And so what anybody that's attending a church needs to ask is some of the structural questions, right? What does accountability look like? How are financial decisions made around here? And so because I've also watched so many pastors, I don't think anybody ever starts a church that goes, you know what, man, I in 10 years, I want to have an affair. I want to lose my family, lose my reputation, and live a life of squalor for the rest of my life, right? Nobody starts with that in mind. But I've seen personally, I know 5 or 6 guys where that's been their story. And I think if you start with the realization that all of us are capable of anything, and you just go, that's just a human reality, then you can build some systems in place to where some of those things just aren't possible, right? And so for us, we have a board that oversees everything. I literally have a board meeting tonight where we go over every other month all of our finances. Some of the guys that are on that board, they see total transparency into, hey, here's every dollar that came in. They don't see every dollar to the penny of exactly where it goes, but they know, hey, here's the big buckets. Me and the guy that's my operations kind of right hand, we set all of our staff's salaries, but for his and I salaries, we just finished a comprehensive thing where we had 3 guys that were on that board that basically did a breakdown of an analysis of, hey, church our size in our region based on what we bring in. Here's what we think is fair and appropriate. And the IRS does require nonprofits to do things like this, to do due diligence. And they basically did a report of findings to the board and said, hey, here's our recommendation for salary for this person and for this person. The board votes on it. I have to recuse myself from the vote because I'm a board member, but I don't get a vote on my own salary. And then they set it, right? And so I can argue, I can go back and forth and have conversation, but I don't get to set my own salary. I have guys that do that for us, right? But again, I think that's where some of the messiness can come in. Is in a really corrupt world, I would just put 3 guys that I know are going to pay me $1 million a year, and all the money's going to go to me. And but I think in some degree, it's what the scriptures say. We know people by their fruit. And I think ministries are known by their fruit as well. Like, what is the fruit of what this ministry is producing? And I don't disagree, man. I think people have a very real frustration with churches that are nothing more than just wanting money. And it's true. There's a lot of guys sitting on top of organizations where it is for them to just get a bigger house and another mansion and another Rolls Royce. And I think it's grotesque, and I am fearful for those guys that they stand before Jesus in judgment.
So the board, so they're pretty much your checks and balance system.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, and there's multiple, right? So there's visibility into everything. None of our staff can spend any money without everybody seeing exactly where it goes, right? So we know, hey, these are the budgets, here's where things go. The part that people don't like to hear is what they wish a church would do is they ask, like, well, how much money did you guys give to orphanages and to the widows? And
you want to see a pie chart, essentially.
Yeah, but like the part that people don't realize is like, okay, you're sitting in church today. Like, how do you think that happens, right? We've got to pay for a building. We've got to pay for all these staff. We've got to keep the lights on.
I have no idea the costs of running a charity or a business these days. It's crazy.
It's
how expensive
substantial.
it is.
Yeah. And so, and again, once we're fully at scale, we're not there yet, but most likely 60 to 70 cents of every dollar we bring in will go to facilities and HR. But again, what we do, what our ministry is the, kids ministry that's there. It's the divorce care ministry. It's the pastors that can show up to funerals and, show up to hospitals when people are sick. It's the student ministry that happens midweek. It's the men's events and the women's events. Like those are all things that happen in our facilities with our staff that, yes, we don't give every dollar that we bring in to, the poor or to, these orphanages, but we do a ton, and we do give financially pretty substantial amounts of money away every single year,
And you're in like a crazy predicament because it's never like no one's really grown in the history of churches like you have so quick.
Yeah.
And so now you have this overwhelming, following, and people who want to come participate in service. And right now, if you're currently operating out of a high school, right?
Yeah.
And so explain kind of the struggles and how crazy this has been and how hard it is for you to like try and get through this step. Like, how do you see this going?
Yeah, man. There's
Start offending people up there or something, trying to.
Yeah, like it's I was on a call this morning with a guy that's is kind of a strategic financial planner guy for churches, and just helping us kind of think through like, hey, what are we not seeing? Because we're trying to think really creatively about it. But yeah, we're essentially at capacity right now with 3 services, and so we have some creative solutions to create some more space, but we think based on our projections by the fall we will be at capacity, and that like we won't be able to grow anymore in our current reality. And so we're kind of trying to solve it 2 ways, in that like what's our short-term solution of getting a separate venue to do something else that's not necessarily ideal, or long-term, how do we buy something? But everything out here is so expensive. The size of what we're looking at is probably on a piece of land that's 15 to 20 acres. It's a building that's 60 to 70,000 square feet, and ballpark is going to be $30 million, and, so you're talking.
Call your dad and his private jet friends.
That's right, man. Hey,
they're miserable. Let's turn it around.
Dude, the irony with those guys is, man, you go golfing with them and they're the guys that are running away to not have the guy clean their clubs to give them $5. I'm like, bro, your net worth is over $100 million. Like, what are you doing?
So we're just going to be going down the street and be like, oh, did they bring Black Friday back? No, that's people waiting to get into Echoes.
That's right. Yeah.
So it's going to be first come, first serve. And and they're literally you're just going to have to turn people away.
Yeah. And that's
crazy.
We're trying to do everything we can to avoid that moment. So yeah, we don't want that to happen.
That's insane. So that's crazy. Hey, MG, show us some of the I want to show these pictures real quick. This is crazy. So what is this? Just like a random weekend? Just
I think
300-400 people standing, waiting, hanging out at the school.
Yeah, I think that photo was on Easter. That's in between services.
This
just
is
people
crazy.
kind of hanging outside. There's face painters.
Look at that. Unreal.
Yeah, that's one of our services there.
So when you walk out and you see that, like, what does that feel like? Is there dopamine? Is it chills? Is it like?
Yeah, it's kind of a combination of all of it, man. I think for me, it's validation that people are searching for something, that people are searching for the same thing that I was looking for a long time, which was, I think, meaning and purpose. And I also, man, for months and months and months was thinking about starting this thing, convinced that nobody would show up. And so there is a part of it that's like, okay, man, people actually showed up. So that's encouraging.
Crazy.
That's during one of our worship services. And again, I think the best advice I could give anybody, that was actually me sitting in there worshiping. If you're building a church or you're building a business, build something that you'd be really excited to be a part of, right? Not something that you just think is a good idea. I tell every pastor out there, man, build a ministry that you're pumped to be in. Make it look like you, feel like you, be your DNA. And I think that's what Echoes is it's just, it's an external representation of, I think, my heart. And it's just cool that other people resonate with it.
That's insane. So with the, we talked a little bit, like there's kind of sometimes a celebrity status that comes along with it.
Yeah.
Like, has anyone ever like asked you for your autograph or anything?
Oh yeah. Yeah.
That's crazy.
Yeah. I had some people ask me to autograph their Bible the other week, and I was like, it's not my book, it's not mine. And so but they were super sweet and kind. And so I took it and just wrote like an encouraging note in it,
That's
but
cool.
I was not going to, sign it. It's really interesting to me because I've thought about it a lot. Like I don't know. We're just in a culture, and I think it goes back to what the scriptures say, that God has placed eternity inside of the soul of humans. And I think all of us are longing for worship. Like, we're built to worship. And there's something about celebrities that we just go, I don't know, like we just put them on a pedestal and we want a photo with them. It's like, well, why? It's like, I don't know, because it somehow elevates me to be around somebody that I perceive as elevated status, right? And I don't know what it is. Like, we just love to make celebrities out of people. And so I think the battle for anybody that's in that position is to, remember you're just a normal person, right? And I think when you start to believe what other people think about you is when things get dangerous, especially for pastors, right? So
how do you navigate do you feel like someone's always not look, do you always have to look over your shoulder like, oh, is someone looking at me? They know our pastor. Like, are you just able
Yeah.
to find peace? Like, is there a little bit of
No,
anxiety there?
I don't know if I would say anxiety, but there's definitely a very real social awareness that when I'm in public, I just assume that somebody that I don't know. It happened yesterday. I was having a meeting with a guy, and somebody just walked up and said, hey, somebody's paid for your guys' breakfast. Like, super sweet, but there's also an awareness that, hey, somebody in here that I have no idea who it is knows who I am. And so it's also one of those things that informs a lot of decisions that I make, right? Like, I don't drink at all in public. And it's just one of those things where I don't want somebody that's in the church to ever see me and just go, okay, if he's drinking, it means it's okay for me. But the downside, the shadow side to it is, it is harder to find places where you can just be real. And it's like a thing where, okay, nobody needs or wants anything from me. I have to assume to some degree you feel that too, right? Of like, once you achieve some level of success, that feels like everybody wants something from me, and separating. For me, it's more of they need something from me, or they want me to be something more to them than you are. And where do you get to just kind of put your walls down and just be a human, and I don't have to, I can just show up as Daniel, not Pastor Daniel. And, and we've had to fight for those environments and curate them. And it's gotten harder, the bigger the platforms have gotten and stuff, but you can do it. It's manageable.
I think for me, some of my businesses have had hundreds of employees,
Yeah.
and it's almost like everyone looks at you as kind of like, hey, they want your time and they want to be acknowledged. And I think that's the hardest thing for me, was like, I don't have enough time in the day to acknowledge 150, 200 people.
Yeah.
And so I just sometimes I would live with a little guilt of like, hey, if I'm not walking around shaking hands, telling everyone they're doing an amazing job, then I'm offending people. And then it starts to snowball, and you're like, geez, am I doing more bad than good, just because it kind of becomes like a no-win situation.
Yeah.
And it's, I felt like the anxiety or the pressure of like, dude, like that's the owner of the company. That's the founder. Like,
Yep.
So no, I definitely can relate. It's a weird situation. And I mean, hopefully you can hire a good management team that can fill, their cups.
Yeah.
I mean, at Uni, we're not huge yet, but we have a lot of incredible people here on staff that are just great people. And as they build their teams, they'll kind of go through that. So when you're hiring people too, I mean, you obviously want people that love God and that have the same principles as you. Is like,
Yeah.
So is your, what is like the process? Are you hiring them more for the church, because it is a charity, more of like your skill set, or like, hey, tell me about your belief systems too? Like, is there kind of a juggling between?
Yeah, well, the part that, again, church is a business, and anybody that doesn't, I know people don't love that when you say that, but like at the end of the day, it's a business. You got to run it like a business. And anybody that isn't is probably not achieving much success, right? Because there's a lot of, we were on a call this morning with our finance people of like, okay, here's where we are from a profit standpoint. The difference is we don't actually keep the profit. There's not like a distribution that happens at the end of the month, right? That's the definition of a nonprofit. But we run to make sure that we're operating at a 20% profit margin, kind of at a minimum. And so when we're hiring, we're hiring. Our assumption is that you're a Christian and a follower of Jesus, right? Like, that part is like, okay, this is the bare minimum, but we're hiring for competency. We want to make sure that people are coming in, and we're at the level now where we keep telling our staff, like, if you are caught doing, like, it's a write up. Like, you've got to be empowering other people to do. You've got to be recruiting. I think the temptation that church staff often believe is that they're hired to do a job. It's not why you're there. It's what the New Testament says in the book of Ephesians, that church staff is actually there to equip and discharge the duties of their ministry and to prepare the church to go out and do the stuff, right? We're the professional builders of people. And so what we need high capacity team builders that are able to recruit and train and develop high capacity teams. And so the irony is a lot of our best hires actually don't come from other churches, which again is one of those things that makes us unique. I see if you have church staff experience as a major knock against you that you would have to really overcome. I would take a guy that's got business experience and sales leadership that already has made income and is now looking for impact. That's really interesting to me, right? Like,
no wonder you're the fastest growing church, bro. You get it.
Well,
their culture's already set. They're set in their ways. They're conditioned, right?
And that's what's hard. And again, that was part of what we had to shift with the core team that we took from the church that I was on, is I had to shift some of the culture of the people that were in the church of, like, that's not what we do anymore. This is who we are, right? And you can either, as we got more clear on who we were, people either got off the boat or they got on board. But the cool part is the more people that got off the boat made room for more people that were aligned with who we were to get on the boat. And I think you've got to be really clear, like, this is who we are. This is the mission and the vision that God has given us. And this is the lane we're going to run in. We tell our teams, we do three things. We don't do a lot, but we want to be the in and out, right? We're not trying to be the Cheesecake Factory that has 7,000 things on the menu. We've got three things.
Don't hate on my cheesecake. That's my one thing. That's my prison meal. Dude.
What are you getting from the Cheesecake Factory?
Oreo cheesecake. Meal? Just give me that. That's the greatest thing in the world.
That's fair. But my only knock is that they have 10,000 other things on the menu. So, which again, if they can do it, they can
clean,
do it well.
simple. I love it.
We're just trying to be in and out, man. We do a couple things. We do them really, really well. And once we feel like we've mastered them and those things are operating seamlessly, we'll consider adding something else.
So, yeah, that's crazy. I wanted to ask you about, like, so we had talked a little about the movement on Christianity.
Mm-hmm.
I always get in deep thought, and I'm like, how can people deny Jesus, that he lived?
Yeah.
Like, with all the actual evidence that we have, like physical evidence. So, I mean, like, where, like, I want you to talk a little bit on, like, when people have been through a lot of trauma, and I know a lot of people who have come from other religions, they just kind of want to push God aside. But it's like, how are you helping, and, like, how can we deny the fact that God actually lives or came to earth?
Yeah. Again, I think if somebody were to try to say that Jesus was not a historical person, I think you're standing against not just the biblical evidence, but all of the non-Christian historical evidence that we have. Like, it's basically a unanimously 100% of historians agree that there was a person named Jesus that was born in a little nothing town called Bethlehem 2,000 years ago, right? He lived, he had a mom named Mary, he had a dad named Joseph, he had a family, he was a carpenter, and everybody also agrees, because we have so much evidence of it, that he died a brutal death on a Roman cross, right? That was the end of his journey. Nobody can really disagree about that, right? The obvious question is what happened to Jesus after his death, right? Because if he doesn't come back to life, then everything else is a facade. And I think again, who originally said it, I'm not sure. It's C.S. Lewis, but it was also coined in a book called The Case for Christ. His essential summation is that there's really only three categories for the person of Jesus, right? You can call him a lunatic, right? Because this was a guy that said some crazy things, right? Like, he told people to eat his body, drink his blood. If you don't hate your own mother and father compared to following me, like, you don't really love God. Like, he said some outlandish things. So you could just make an argument that he was a lunatic that was crazy.
It's just like Trump and McGregor, maybe trying to get views, man.
That's right.
Smart guy.
Yeah. So you could just say he was a lunatic. I could hear that. Or you could say that he was a liar, right? That he was intentionally trying to manipulate people to build some type of, following for influence, and he just kind of accidentally got himself killed in the process of doing that. You could make that argument, but the one where we try to say, no, he taught some good principles, he taught some good things, like that category just doesn't exist, because he himself said that there's only one way to get to God. It's through him. That he says he and the Father are one. Nobody gets to heaven except through him, right? He would forgive sins. And so the third category is that he maybe potentially actually is who he claimed to be, right? It's Lord, lunatic, or liar. Those are really the only three categories you can put Jesus in. Most people that I know that aren't Christian, they put Jesus in this other category that's like, no, he was a good teacher. I put him up there with Buddha and Muhammad and these other people that lived good lives, and you can learn some moral principles from them. And I just think that's it's a bit of a cop-out, right? Because, yeah.
So they didn't even really have books back then and scrolls and things like that?
Yeah.
Or how was the Bible originally written?
Yeah, so most of it was oral tradition, right?
Okay.
Lots of oral tradition until they started to really write things down.
And so how young was he when he kind of started to proclaim as God, and how early are those records? Was he in his teens or?
Yeah, so the part that's interesting is we don't have a ton of historical evidence of what Jesus's, early life was. We do have a couple times where he's, in the temple and he's teaching, and the scriptures say that he was teaching with authority that was like, okay, something's different about this guy. And obviously Mary and Joseph knew from the very beginning, right? Angels appeared to them and told them hey, you're giving birth to the Messiah. But it isn't until Jesus turns 30, right? He gets baptized. He has this kind of really cool moment in the Jordan River where John the Baptist actually baptizes him. It's the only time in Scripture where you see the fullness of the Trinity on the scene, right? It says that, obviously Jesus is there in the water. It says the skies part. The Holy Spirit descends. It says like a dove. Everybody always thinks it's a dove, but it says it was like a dove, comes down from the heaven, and the Father speaks in heaven and says, this is my Son in whom I'm well pleased. He gets baptized, gets filled with the Holy Spirit, and then immediately he's led into the desert, right? And for 40 days, he's tempted in the wilderness. He's tempted, tried, and brutal 40 days, but he comes out of the desert, and now the scriptures say that he has the power of the Holy Spirit. And from that moment forward, the next 3 years of his life really mark the supernatural and the miraculous, right? That's what we read as the Gospels are really from that point forward.
So if you're trying to prove it wrong, you have a kid who, it's documented by all the apostles, right? And the 4 major gospel books, right?
Yep.
They're all, I saw a chart the other day, and it was showed the references and it charts them.
Yeah.
Michael, try and Google that chart. It's insane to see the consistencies.
Yeah, I'm assuming what the one you're talking about is probably even the connections from the Old Testament, the prophecies fulfilled, and then all of the consistencies that the New Testament has. So I know the graph you're talking about.
So a human being, there's no way that someone could make that up because of those points. So it pretty much proves the Bible to be true.
Well, again, the other part too that's really interesting, even if somehow you think and are able to just say, hey, Jesus was a lunatic, right? That's it right there. Yeah, that one.
That is insane.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. Those are showing all the cross references and all the things that are perfectly connected.
So historians have proven, can we prove that it was the time that they were written?
Oh, yeah.
So we can prove that this book was written at this time and this book was written around this time.
Yeah.
So we know that as factual evidence. And then this chart shows us the cross references.
Yep. So a lot of that is connecting the Old Testament prophecies that were talked about, right? We have, again, I'm not like a original manuscript guru. Anybody listening to this, go find a guy named Wesley Huff, probably one of the leading apologists in the world today, based up in Canada. And he talks through a lot of the original manuscripts that we have and how they're brilliant proof for a lot of this. But the Isaiah scrolls are kind of the famous, when it comes to the Old Testament, what we have is the prophet Isaiah and what he talked about, the Savior that would come. And it's incredible how exactly spot on Jesus was, though they didn't have those things. So nobody could have just fabricated all of these things and kind of made all of this stuff up. Like it's really a mind-blowing thing. But going back to what I was saying, I think the part that was more interesting to me as a skeptic of the faith, thinking about it, it's like, okay, it's one thing if you become a crazy person and you're convinced that you're the next Messiah and you go nuts and you die for it. Okay, that's one thing. I don't understand how you convince 12 other people to die for a knowing lie, right? That they all know it's a scam, it's all a fraud, it's all made up. And yet Jesus's closest friends all die these brutal martyr deaths. You know what I mean? Like boiled alive, crucified upside down, beheaded, skinned alive, like just horrible things, right? And those guys, after Jesus is crucified on a cross, immediately they go into hiding because they're logical and they're like, okay, they're coming for us next. So they go into hiding. Famously, they deny Jesus in public and they're like, hey, weren't you that guy that was with him? And they're like, no, bro, not me. Must be somebody else, my doppelganger or whatever. And then all of a sudden something shifts, and those same guys that were running and hiding and fleeing are now boldly proclaiming in the streets that Jesus is resurrected. I've seen him. He's the only way to get to heaven, even at the point of being persecuted by the church and by the Roman government to where they all die. How do you convince a bunch of guys to die for a lie? I think that's the part for me as a skeptic that was harder to get over, you know, and because it's one thing for a random person to die for a lie. For people that are not that person to die for a lie, to give up their businesses, their families, all of that. That's a hard one for me.
Well, and there's not even like, it's not like they're on social media getting clout or followers or like,
That's right.
It's really just their community. They're not like, what's the upside for them? If there's really no upside.
On this earth, there was no upside.
Yeah, for them.
Yeah.
I could see why people would do shady stuff or, have a narrative,
Sure.
today for clout, but it's like, these are small, like farming communities, right? Like this wasn't like, they clearly had to have known without a doubt that he was God.
The most audacious claim that they all make, right? The thing that the scriptures say is the difference between them in hiding and them going out and boldly proclaiming the gospel is that the resurrected Jesus comes back and walks with them for a long period of time, right? Multiple weeks. And he's shown to hundreds and hundreds of people, right? That was a fact that could have been refuted, that the early historians could have gone to people that were there, that were a part of these moments and could have asked them. And they're like, no, it's completely made up. These things, these people are just lying. Like when all of the early manuscripts started to be formed and written, there was people that were still alive that could have refuted a lot of this stuff, right? Because the linchpin for everything with Christianity, it's not the Bible, it's not the, Jonah in the belly of the whale, it's none of that stuff. The linchpin of Christianity is the resurrection, right? It's what Paul essentially says in his writing is that if the resurrection didn't happen, then we've all wasted our lives. And that for me is the most true statement ever. If the resurrection is not real, I have absolutely wasted my whole life. But if it's real, man, the implications are unbelievably far-reaching, and there's potentially nothing more important in the world than that.
That's crazy, Art. So what is like the second coming? That's crazy to think about.
Yeah.
Like God coming back to earth. So like, what's your like when your kids come ask you like, hey dad, like is Jesus coming back? Like what's your philosophy on that?
The part that's easy to say is that we know 100% that Jesus is coming back, right? I think we're supposed to live as if he's coming back tomorrow, but what the scriptures are clear is that nobody will know the day or time. And so there are people in my church, and I love them, God bless them, that spend their whole lives trying to connect all the dots and do all the things and go through the revelations that are in the book of Daniel, connect it to the book of Revelation and go, this is it, and this is the thing. And when Trump got his second term, this connected, and now we're in the celestial. And I'm just like, bro, do your thing, big dog. Like I'm just
Y2K,
trying to,
bro. We were all sitting there like waiting, like checking it. It's midnight.
That's right.
Thought
It
that
didn't happen. Yeah.
Dude, in the Aztec calendar.
Oh, bro. Yeah. The amount of times I've gotten emails and messages like, this is it. I know when Jesus is coming back. I respond and I say, well, I know you're wrong because the scriptures say that literally nobody will know, right? Now, there's some really big signs that will have to happen when the end times start happening where we see some of the things in the book of Revelation. Some of those will be clear, right? Where we start to get into some craziness and, the Antichrist is on the earth and all that stuff, like, we will be able to see these things. But at the same time, like, it also says you won't know who the Antichrist is. So I think the whole point is live like the disciples lived. These guys used to leave a chair empty at every dinner that they had, believing that Jesus was coming back tonight, right? And obviously we're 2,000 years removed from him ascending to heaven. And so I think we should live as if, like, man, he's coming back tomorrow, right? I think the greater danger is believing that we all have forever and that, none of us are going to face death. And it's just not true. It's a 1-to-1 ratio in this life, man.
Okay, MG, can we get a third chair over here for next episode, please?
That's right.
So do you think it's going to be like, how often do you give it much thought, or do you just?
Dude, to be honest, I think I disappoint people when they ask me stuff like this, because I honestly, I don't think about it a lot. I'm not that smart. I go, man, I think the mission is really simple. Like, there's a really long line of people right now that if the rapture happens tomorrow, the end of the earth happens tomorrow, they're going to spend eternity in hell, and a whole separate conversation of what hell actually is. But either way, it's not good. And my job, my responsibility, the burden and the task that I've been given with my time on this earth is to do everything I can, leverage all that I have to get the people in that line, to get into the line of the people going to heaven. And if I have 20 years to do that, or I have 20 days to do that, I'm just going to try and do it as much as I can.
That's amazing. So, in closing, I want to talk a little so Echoes, what's the website to the church?
Echoes.church or
Echoes.church.
echoeschurch.com. Both of them will get you there.
So, I mean, are we trying to invite people or not invite people? Because we don't.
Man, we want. Okay. Yeah, if you're living in the East Valley, man, come hang out. Like, we'd love to have everybody. We'll make space. We'll figure it out. Come hang out.
And you've recently launched. You guys are going to start streaming the sermons, or no?
No. So we post them to YouTube, and that's more of like a philosophical thing where we don't live stream, and that's just because we really value people being in the building.
But you can watch them after?
Yeah, we post them. Typically right now they're up by Tuesday morning. Our team's working to get that to be Monday morning, and then eventually Sunday night, to where within a few hours of us finishing services, the services will be up on YouTube and you can watch it all.
Cool. And then just in closing, I just really want to dwell on the fact, what is there any advice that you would give to listeners, any people going through hard times, or people, I mean, the world's a tough place.
Yeah.
Can you enlighten us with just a positive message to help people get through the daily grind?
Yeah, man. I think life is difficult, right? And I think our natural propensity is to try to find meaning and purpose out of everything that we're doing. I would encourage everybody to ask the biggest questions that are around. I remember sitting in my dorm when I was in college, kind of looking out the window and just asking the question, like, man, what am I here for? What's the purpose of all of this? And I think as people wrestle through that, like, hey, what's the point of all of this? Where am I going? Why am I here? I think in there you start to gain the most valuable thing in the world, which is perspective, right? Because if eternity is real, then maybe death isn't as detrimental as we think it is, and it's more of a pathway. It's a gateway to transition to the next life, and maybe suffering has a redemptive purpose. And I think the question of eternity, it frames everything else in this life. You know what I mean? And so I just would encourage people, man, stay positive. Know that you have a God in heaven that's for you, and that the scriptures say he's beckoning all people to himself, and that even somebody that's here that has no idea why they're here, the scriptures say that ingrained into their DNA is purpose, and that God made them on purpose. He has a reason that they are here, and nobody's here accidentally, man.
That's amazing. Appreciate it, man. Thanks so much for coming on.
Dude, thanks for having me.
It's been a pleasure. Super grateful for you. I mean, I still believe, man, you're superhuman, man. You are a superhero to a lot of people, and thanks for growing the church and everything that you're doing.
Man.
You're
Thanks
one of
for
a
being
kind,
part
bro.
of it, bro.
Thanks so much for being here.
Yeah, man, for sure.